In this video, we're going to see how we can use a reference unit to gauge the spacing between objects. In this particular simple setup, we only have this one area that we need to look at. But let's start by observing the actual still life and taking a reference unit. So as I look at the void here, the space between them, let's just go to the narrowest dimension, which would be down here, the space between the tall can and the tuna can. I'm going to try to carefully sight that distance, lining up my pencil point to one side of the tuna can and my thumb with one side of the tall can. And it's right about there. Now let's take that and compare it to anything in the still life that we want to. Now I'm noticing that the soup can looks like it might be about a 1-to-1 relationship here, which would be very convenient. And you can see that we are probably right on, we're really close, if not right on. So what we've discovered is that this distance here happens to be the same width as the width of the can, of the soup can. So let's check our drawing. So if we have a 1-to-1 relationship here, and you can see right away that it's off. If we have a 1-to-1 relationship, we should get the same dimension. Let's just start with this here and see what it looks like. Okay, that's not 1-to-1, of course. Or if you wanted to start with the soup can, you'd measure like that and gauge to the void, and you can see that's not 1-to-1. So what we need to do is we need to move something, and I think it would be easier moving this object than these two. So what I'm going to do is I want a 1-to-1 relationship here and here. So we'll measure that distance, come over here and make a mark. That's the actual width that we really want. And now we're going to slide that whole thing over. So we're not changing proportion, we're not changing scale. All we're doing is changing the distance. So what you could do is you could go through and just give yourself some plumb lines here, about so far, that are going to tell you how wide the can will be in that position. We're going to stick with this height. This height seems like it's pretty good. I'm going to stick with this height. That looks pretty good. So within this box here, we're going to redraw the tall can. Let's try to freehand a fluid ellipse. Drop the sides down. Freehand another ellipse. Drawing through if it works better for you. And I'm going to go through and just emphasize this. I'm going to emphasize this as the most correct estimate of what's going on in the actual still life. So I've drawn this can about 4 times. It was way too tall, we shortened it. Then it was too small, we brought it up to size, and then it was too far to the left and we shifted it over. So that the final one is the darkest one. So we should be looking at, at this point we can just look and intuitively compare the two, and everything looks pretty good. If we're pretty happy, then we're done with the drawing. One thing I think I notice is that, I think this almost seems a little bit too deep. I'm just going to take just a bit off of that ellipse. That seems to be more comfortable on my eye. So there's an example of shifting to intuitive drawing again, even though we're using an analytical process. That's perfectly acceptable. So in this drawing, we spent time checking proportions, we spent time checking scale, and we spent some time checking the spacing between the objects, and we're done.